For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Journalist and author Rehana Rossouw joins me to discuss her first book, What Will People Say? Your first book, What Will People Say, is a work of fiction. You, however, have been a journalist for the past 30 years. Why did you choose to write a work of fiction when it seems to be a trend of journalists currently to write non-fiction books?
I don't keep up with trends much, and the few trends I do keep up with, there's probably a likelihood that I won't follow them. I had an idea for this novel. It came to me as a fiction story. It came into my head almost fully formed, and so I set off and wrote the book that I wanted to write. It didn't occur to me to follow trends or check what others were doing. It's the story that I had in my head. It was demanding to come out.
Had you always wanted to write a book?
Yes, I love books. Of everything in the entire world, I love books most. Note, I said thing, not person. And yeah, I started reading early. It's what I do if I have any spare time, I read. I was a bit nervous, of course, about writing my own book. What if it wasn't up to standard? What if it wasn't up to scratch? But so far, so good. I've gotten very good feedback.
The characters in your story are very believable. Did you draw any inspiration for the characters on real-life people you know or knew? Is the book based in any way on your own experiences in childhood?
Not really. So what is real in my book is the timeline. In 1986, a lot of events happened, the biggest one being the nationwide state of emergency and the detentions of thousands of political activists. There are a lot of political events in my book which are absolutely true and which happened in 1986. But everything else is fiction. I suppose I did draw on people. The big thing, obviously, is the language and the way that people speak, and the way people speak particularly on the Cape Flats. But all my characters are fictional. I don't know these people. I made them up entirely. But it was important for me to reflect what actually happened in South Africa in 1986 and what effect those events had on ordinary people trying to lead the most ordinary lives, but some of their dreams were impossible under the circumstances in the country.
What inspired you to write this story, and what research, if any, did you do? How long did it take you to write?
It took me a very long time. I first wrote the book in 2002. Wrote the entire book, finished it in 1 year. I thought the story was good, but the book was not, I thought, good enough for publication. So I set it aside for a few years and then went back to university and studied creative writing, and then had the confidence to sit down as a writer and write it the way it should have been written. So I got the plot out in 2002, and then I sat for 2 years doing my master's in creative writing at Wits University, rewriting the story, making it real, making the characters real, structuring the book a lot more than I did the first time I set it out.
How much did it change between the first draft and the current draft?
It got fatter, bigger, stronger. All of the characters developed more of their own lives outside of this family that I describe. Most importantly, what I did when I rewrote the book was I changed the language. In my first draft, I tried to write it in what I suppose we call the Queen's English, but it wasn't working. Especially a lot of my characters are gangsters. When I sat down to rewrite the book, the gangsters didn't seem real. They don't talk like that. And so I gave the gangsters their own language, and then everybody else started looking so stilted and so unnatural and so not real. So the biggest change was definitely the language. But the story didn't change at all. In fact, the last line in my book today is the last line in the book I wrote in 2002.
The book is written in Cape Flat slang, which most South Africans should understand. You haven't included a glossary for foreign readers, though. Why did you write the book this way?
I didn't write it for foreign readers, although, of course, if I do have foreign readers, I would take that as an enormous compliment. I wrote it for South African readers first and foremost. We did discuss in my creative writing class whether or not I should italicize the slang, and whether I should include a glossary for people who don't understand that slang. And for me, in my rewriting especially, for me to make these people real, I had to let them speak the way that we speak. And so it became for me an act of rebellion, not to italicize certain words, not to include a glossary. The feedback I've had so far from a few foreign readers who have picked up the book is that they do get it. Eventually they do come to understand what is meant by bang instead of scared, and what is meant by skrik instead of fright. People do pick it up, so I'm quite flattered by that. But this is our language, this is the way we speak, and if I'm writing a book about us, the book should be the way we are. So yes, that's what I did.
I personally prefer that you didn't italicize it, otherwise almost every fifth word would be italicized, and
Absolutely.
the flow isn't nice then, and the font isn't nice.
Absolutely.
So I like that.
This is our English. There are many different kinds of English in South Africa. This is only one of them. And we all know it. We all know Trevor Noah. We all know Mark Lottering. We all know Evita Bezuidenhout. That language is not difficult to pick up.
You were born and raised in Cape Town, but are now currently in self-imposed exile in Johannesburg. What brought you to Johannesburg? Do you think you'll ever go back to the Cape? And what do you miss most about the coastal city?
Well, I came to Johannesburg for a job. I'm a journalist, so work brought me to Johannesburg. I'm still in Johannesburg because I enjoy my work here, and I still have a few years left in my career. But I do miss Cape Town. I am from Cape Town. I feel I'm Cape Town. I'm told by my family that when the plane lands in Cape Town and I step out of the plane, my entire visage changes. I relax, I speak differently. I become more me, I think. I'd love to go back to Cape Town. The thing I miss the most, Fynbos. Fynbos is spectacularly beautiful. I'd like to live in a place where I'm surrounded by fynbos every day. That would be my dream come true.
Can we expect more books from you?
I hope so. I just need to find the time. I hope so. So far, touch wood, this book is selling. So maybe a publisher would be interested in a second book from me.
Do you have any ideas?
Many. Many.
Would they be the same genre as this one?
A lot of people have told me that they are not finished with the characters in my first book. They'd like to hear more, they'd like to see what happens next. Apparently my book's quite depressing. I've had a couple of people tell me that they cried while they read it. They'd like to see better outcomes for some of the characters. So there is a bit of pressure on me to write a sequel. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to.
Well, I suppose, especially thinking of Anthony, if his outcome is bad, it's real life.
That's what happens. That is what happens. It doesn't matter what dreams parents have for their children. Sometimes the circumstances under which they live make it impossible to achieve those dreams, yes.
That was journalist Rehana Rossouw speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about her first book, What Will People Say?